Halloween is getting closer and closer. At first we talked about my favorite horror games, and then if you were on my Patreon, you would have seen my favorite horror specials. So let's end this month with a look at my favorite horror movies. So let's start things off with Psycho from 1960. Released June 16, 1960 by Paramount and directed by one of the greatest of all time, at least in my opinion, horror directors, Alfred Hitchcock. The film begins with Marion Crane, a secretary who steals $40,000 from her employer and flees town to start a new life. On her way, she stops for the night at the famed Bates Motel, run by the shy and awkward Norman Bates, who lives nearby with his domineering, unseen mother. That night, in one of the most infamous scenes in film history, Marianne is murdered in the shower by a mysterious figure. Later, Marianne's sister, Leela, and her boyfriend Sam investigate her disappearance, eventually uncovering the shocking truth that Norman's mother is dead, and that Norman himself has been assuming her personality due to a psychotic split. Now, there are a few key themes in this film, so let's look at them. First, you got duality and identity. The lines between sanity and madness are blurred here, as we see Norman's personality being split between two personalities. Next is voyeurism. This one is shown as Hitchcock explores the audience's own fascination with others. This is mirrored in Norman's behavior. And then there's guilt and repression. We see these two a lot in the movie. And that's what drives the story, with Marion's guilt after stealing the money from her boss and Norman's repressed trauma. Now, before Psycho came out, most of the horror movies that were around at that time had monsters as their scary opponent. However, Psycho changed all that entirely by replacing monsters with a psychologically disturbed human being. Now, for me, Psycho paved the way for slasher films, at least in my mind, and psychological thrillers as well. An example I have to mention, which is more of a thriller than a horror film, but is a perfect example, is the old movie Fear. Next up on the list is the original It from 1980. Now, I know in 2017, this movie was remade, and trust me, it wasn't all that good. The It I am referring to is the original one with Tim Curry playing the titular role as Pennywise the Clown. It was originally a two-part miniseries that aired on ABC, with part 1 November 18th of 1980, and the second part airing 2 days later, November 20th that same year. It has a stellar cast, some of whom went on to become great actors and who have passed away, such as Harry Anderson and John Ritter. But here is an interesting fact. If you are a fan of The Family Guy, you know one of the voice actors is Seth Green. Well, who back in 1980 played a role in the miniseries as a kid. Set in the fictional town of Derry, Maine, the story unfolds in two timelines. The 1960s, when the kids are kids, and in the 1990s, when they finally become adults. In part 1, a group of 7 misfit kids calling themselves the Losers Club discovers that a mysterious disappearance and murders are in the town and are caused by an ancient evil known as It, which often appears as Pennywise the Clown to lure little children in. Part 1 ends when they confront and seemingly defeat It in the sewers beneath Derry, making a pact to return if it ever resurfaces. In part 2, 30 years later, the murders begin again. The now adult Losers Club return to Derry to fulfill their childhood promise and face their deepest fears once more, confronting Pennywise in the final showdown beneath this town. This version of It, to me, will always be a classic. It paves the way for the whole killer clown role in horror, so all you Terrifier fans remember, without Pennywise, there would be no Art the Clown. Up next is Carrie from 1976. Carrie tells a tragic story of Carrie White, a shy, introverted high school girl who was relentlessly bullied by her classmates and emotionally abused by her fanatically religious mother, Margaret White. Carrie lives a lonely life until she discovers something extraordinary. She has telekinetic powers, the ability to move objects with her mind. Now, after a humiliating prank at prom where they decide to drench her in pig's blood of all things, Carrie's rage boils over like a teapot. She then unleashes her telekinetic powers in horrifying, fierce massacre that becomes one of the most famous scenes in horror cinema. Yay! Once again, we have a horror movie with some notable themes, so let's look into them. First, we have bullying and revenge. The story is a terrifying reflection of how cruelty and humiliation can fester into pure violence. Then we have religious fanaticism. Carrie's mother's strict beliefs create an environment of guilt and fear. Followed by the theme of coming of age and repression. Carrie's journey mirrors a twisted version of adolescence where self-discovery turns deadly. And the final theme we have is power and control. Carrie's telekinesis becomes both liberation and pure destruction all at the same time. Hell, even decades later, Carrie stands out because it blends psychological drama, supernatural horror, and emotional tragedy. It's not just about telekinesis, it's about loneliness, cruelty, and what happens when a person is pushed a bit too far. Now, this is your average revenge horror flick. You know, the one where the person seeks revenge for being wronged. In this case, being humiliated by having pig's blood dumped on her. Carrie then seeks revenge by using her own new power to exact the revenge. Revenge horror films are my favorite type of horror movie of all time. There's no monsters, no slashers, just one person who wishes to exact their revenge. Another good example to me is the 2010 gory horror flick, I Spit in Your Grave. And followed by that by 2007, The Brave One. Both have a person who is wronged and then exacts their revenge. Up next in the list is Night of the Living Dead from 1968. Night of the Living Dead story begins with a brother and sister, Johnny and Barbara, visiting a rural cemetery. Johnny jokingly teases his sister saying, "They're coming to get you, Barbara." Moments later, he's actually attacked and killed by a strange, stumbling man. Barbara flees to a nearby farmhouse for safety. At the farmhouse, she meets Ben, a practical and courageous man who fortifies the house against more of these mysterious attacks. As night falls, other survivors emerge from the cellar. The Cooper family, Harry, Helen, and their sick daughter Karen, and the young couple, Tom and Judy. Tensions rise between Ben and Harry over how to survive. Should they stay upstairs and defend the house, or barricade themselves in the cellar? Meanwhile, the number of undead outside continue to grow. First up, it invented the modern zombie. Now, before Romero's film, zombies were mostly tied to Haitian voodoo myths, reanimated slaves controlled by magic. Night of the Living Dead introduced the idea of a flesh-eating ghoul. Reanimated corpses driven by hunger, what we now think of as zombies. Next is a social commentary. What through Romero claimed it wasn't intentional at first, the film is widely interpreted as a commentary on race relations and social collapse in America. The protagonist, Ben, is played by Dwayne Jones, a black actor, and his plain, heroic demeanor contrasts with the fearful, irrational behavior of the white character, a radical choice in 1968. Then, the film's grim ending mirrored the civil unrest and racial violence of the late 1960s. Plus, the independent film revolution, made on a shoestring budget outside the Hollywood system, Night of the Living Dead proved that independent films could achieve massive cultural impact. It became a cult phenomenon and a box office hit, grossing over $30 million nationwide. And then it became public domain by pure accident. Due to a copyright mistake, they failed to include the proper notice. Night of the Living Dead entered the public domain, which helped it spread wildly. Through late-night TV, drive-ins, and VHS tapes, making it one of the most widely seen horror films ever. Night of the Living Dead and its many sequels became a horror staple, and remember, all you Walking Dead fans, to me that would never have been a thing unless Night of the Living Dead was ever made. Now, what list of horror movies wouldn't be good unless it had some horror icons on it? So let's start off with Halloween and Michael Myers. Halloween opens with Halloween night 1963 in the small town of Haddonfield, Illinois. A young boy named Michael Myers, just 6 years old, brutally murders his older sister Judith with, of all things, a kitchen knife. He is sent to Smith Grove Sanitarium where he has remained catatonic for 15 years. Now on October 30th, 1978, Michael is scaffolded being transferred. The next day is Halloween. He returns to Haddonfield stalking a group of teenagers, particularly Laurie Strode, played by Jamie Lee Curtis. Dressed in a mechanic's jumpsuit and wearing a blank white mask, famously a modified version of William Shatner, Michael silently kills Laurie's friends one by one. Dr. Sam Lewis, Michael's psychiatrist, tracks him down, warning everyone that Michael is pure evil, the embodiment of evil. The climax has Laurie fighting to survive as Michael attacks her repeatedly. Loomis arrives just in time to shoot Michael several times, sending him falling from a balcony, but when Loomis looks over the edge, Michael's body is nowhere to be found. The movie ends with heavy breathing over shots of empty streets and a house, implying that evil is still out there. Now here's some things that John Carpenter emphasized with Halloween. First up, you've got the suspense over gore. There's very little blood here, and it's all about tension in what is unseen. Followed by point-of-view shots. You often see Michael's eyes, creating an eerie sense of voyeurism. The Shape, which Michael Myers isn't treated as a man, but as an unstoppable, almost supernatural presence. It gave us the final girl trope. Laurie Strode became the template for the resourceful, moral, pure survivor of countless future slashers. One thing to note here is the mask. It was a $1.98 Captain Kirk mask that was spray painted white. Tommy Doyle, the boy Laurie was babysitting, was named after a character in Rear Window. Carpenter loved Hitchcock. Another thing to note is that the movie's original working title was The Babysitter Murderers, and Carpenter was only 30 years old when he directed it. I've always loved the Halloween franchise as a whole, except for the third movie, Season of the Witch. Here's a bit of history about why the third is so bad, though. Basically, John Carpenter originally wanted Halloween to be an anthology series instead of what has become. Michael Myers worked well with viewers, and so after the third movie was a flop, he decided to go back to what worked. Next up is another horror icon, A Nightmare on Elm Street from 1984. Released November 9th, 1984 and directed by the great Wes Craven, the film introduced the world to Freddy Krueger, a burned, razor-gloved killer who attacked teenagers in their dreams, and if he kills you, you die in real life. Set in the fictional town of Springwood, Ohio, the story follows Nancy Thompson and her friends who begin experiencing terrifying nightmares featuring the same mysterious figure, a man with a melted face and bladed gloves. As the dreams grow deadlier, Nancy learns that Freddy Krueger was once a child murderer who was killed by a group of vengeful parents after escaping justice on a technicality. Now he's back from beyond the grave, exacting revenge to the children of their dreams. To survive, Nancy has to face Freddy head-on, blurring the lines between dream and reality. Here's a little bit about Freddy Krueger, the Dream Demon. He was portrayed by the actor Robert Englund. Full name, Frederick Charles Krueger. Weapon of choice, glove with razor blade. Signature look, fedora, red and green striped sweater, burnt skin, and sadistic grin. And catchphrase style, dark humor and twisted one-liners. Unlike silent killers like Jason or Michael Myers, Freddy talks. He taunts his victims using their fears and insecurities against them. One of the reasons I love these movies is because they are so twisted and so dark. Some of the death scenes are kind of early precursors to those of the twisted and weird death scenes of Final Destination series. Up next is one of my most favorite recent horror icons that comes from the movie of Terrifier, Art the Clown. Terrifier is a gritty, ultra-violent slasher series created by Damien Leone, centered around the Art the Clown, a sadistic, silent killer who has become one of the most horror modern icons. The series began as a small independent project, but exploded into popularity due to its shocking gore, practical effects, and cult reputation circle. Art the Clown's first appearance in Leon's 2008 short film The Ninth Circle, and later in the 2013 anthology All Hallows Eve, which stitched together several of Leon's shorts. Audience reactions to Art were so strong that Leon decided to give him his own full-length feature series, actually. I love these movies because Art the Clown is my new favorite horror icon, and yes, I still love the classic ones, but Art the Clown has become by far one of the goriest ones of all time. Next up is Child's Play from 1988. Child's Play is a movie from 1988 that introduced the world to one of the most iconic villains in horror history, Chucky, the killer doll. Directed by Tom Holland, who was also directed Fright Night, this film blends supernatural horror with slasher elements and a twisted sense of dark humor. The story begins with Charles Lee Ray, a notorious serial killer known as the Lake House Strangler. After being fatally shot by police, Ray uses a voodoo ritual to transfer his soul into a good guy doll, a popular children's toy, before his human body dies. To which the doll ends up being purchased by Karen Barclay as a birthday gift for her son Andy. Andy is thrilled with his new friend Chucky until strange things start to happen. People close to the family begin dying under mysterious circumstances, and Andy insists that Chucky is alive and is responsible. At first, as usual, no one believes him. Not his mother, not even the police. But as the murders start to pile up, the horrifying truth becomes undeniable. Chucky is real, alive, and out for revenge. Child's Play was a box office success and became a full-blown horror franchise, bringing numerous sequels and even a reboot and a TV series. Over the years, Chucky evolved from a straight-up slasher villain to a wisecracking horror icon, similar to those like Freddy Krueger, balancing scares with dark comedy. Here's a brief list of some of the sequels. You've got Child's Play, followed by the sequel, followed by another sequel, Bride of Chucky, Seed of Chucky, Curse of Chucky, Cult of Chucky, the Chucky the TV series, and then the ill-fated reboot, Child's Play from 2019. There you have it, a few of my favorite horror movies. Horror is one of my favorite genres, and I have many more that I could talk about, but this video will go on forever. So what are your favorite horror movies? Let me know in the comments. Until then, I'm Professor Rich. Remind you to hit that like button, slash the subscribe button, and ring that bell so you get a heads up on my next video. Until then, peace out and happy Halloween.